In the quiet suburbs of Westfield, New Jersey, stood a grand Victorian mansion called Knoll. 19 rooms, marble floors, chandeliers that caught the morning light and scattered it like diamonds across polished wood. A sweeping staircase curved through its heart, and a stained glass skylight flooded the ballroom with color when the sun hit just right. It was the kind of home that whispered of success and secrets. Inside that mansion lived John Emil List, a man of order, discipline, and unshakable faith. An accountant by trade, a veteran of 2 wars, a husband, a father, a man who believed that perfection was not only possible, but necessary. Every corner of the house reflected his meticulous nature. Books arranged by height, bills stacked by date, and dinner always served at 6. To the outside world, Knoll stood as a monument to his success and stability. But within its walls, the air was heavy, thick with silence, distance, and something unspoken. To neighbors, the List family was the picture of American perfection. John List, the respectable church-going patriarch. His wife, Helen, elegant and poised, though her smile had grown tired in recent years. Their 3 children, Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick. Bright, polite, full of promise. And his elderly mother, Alma, who lived comfortably in her upstairs suite, reading her Bible by the window each morning. They were a family that seemed to have everything. And yet, behind those locked doors, something dark was taking shape. Every Sunday, the family sat in the same church pew, upright, disciplined, proper. But behind those stained glass smiles, the walls were closing in. John List was a man trapped by appearances. His life revolved around control. Moral, financial, spiritual. But by 1971, that control was slipping through his fingers. He had lost his job at the bank months earlier. Every morning, he still dressed in his gray suit, carried his briefcase, and pretended to go to work. Instead, he sat in train stations and libraries, reading newspapers, wondering how to keep up the illusion. Helen, once graceful, had become ill and bitter. Years earlier, she contracted syphilis, a secret she hid from him before marriage. Now the disease and her alcoholism left her fragile and paranoid. His daughter Patricia had joined the school theater club and dreamed of becoming an actress. To John, that was unacceptable, a profession of vanity and sin. And his teenage sons? They loved music, girls, and freedom. All things John believed led straight to moral decay. In his mind, his family was slipping away from God and from him. Then came the final blow. The mortgage. Bills piled high, savings gone. He was weeks away from losing the mansion. Pride would not let him face humiliation. To John List, death was preferable to disgrace. Then came November 9th, 1971. It was a crisp Tuesday morning. Helen sat at the kitchen table sipping her coffee. John walked behind her quietly, calm, deliberate, and pulled out his 9mm pistol. One shot. Helen fell instantly, her cup still trembling on the table. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, where his mother was preparing breakfast. "Mother?" he said softly. When she turned, he shot her once above the left eye. She collapsed beside her plate of toast. John wiped his glasses. No emotion, just efficiency. He waited for his children to come home from school. When Patricia walked in, still holding her books, he met her in the hallway. A single shot to the head. Moments later, Frederick returned. Same fate. Finally, he drove to his son John Jr.'s soccer game. Neighbors recall seeing him in the stands, cheering quietly. He brought his son home. That was the hardest part. John Jr. fought back. There were defensive wounds, multiple gunshots. When it was over, John stood over his son's body, trembling, whispering a prayer. He placed each body on a sleeping bag in the mansion's ballroom, except his mother. She was too heavy to move. Then he cleaned the floors and cut his image out of every family photograph. Before leaving Knoll, John List sat at his desk and wrote a 5-page letter to his pastor, explaining why he had murdered everyone he loved. "Dear Pastor," he wrote, "by the time you read this, my family will be in heaven. I could no longer watch them suffer. Not from hunger, nor from the moral decay of this world. I could not bear the thought of them turning away from God. It may look like murder to others, but in truth it is a mercy. I believe our souls will be united again before the throne of the Almighty. I know what I have done cannot be undone, but I trust that God, in His infinite wisdom, will understand my reasons. He signed his name, sealed the envelope, and left it on the desk beside his Bible, confident that heaven awaited him and the family he had just destroyed. For nearly a month, no one noticed the lists were gone. Patricia's teachers assumed the family had taken a sudden vacation. Neighbors saw the lights glowing inside the mansion night after night, until one by one, the bulbs began to burn out. Mail piled high in the box, milk deliveries spoiled on the porch. The once immaculate lawn now stood still, untended. Something felt wrong. At first, the neighbors tried to ignore it. After all, this was the List family. Quiet, respectable, private. But as the days turned into weeks and the silence deepened, concern turned into fear. One neighbor finally called the police, reporting that something was terribly off at Knoll. The officers arrived, hesitant but alert. The house was dark, cold, and eerily quiet. The front door was locked, the windows drawn. Finally, on December 7th, 1971, police forced their way into the mansion. What they found inside would haunt them for years. The entire house was freezing. The heat had been turned off. In the grand ballroom, under the pale wash of the skylight, lay the bodies of Helen, Patricia, Frederick, and John Jr. Neatly lined up, each covered with a towel. Soft organ music still played on the intercom system, looping endlessly through the house. A note on the table directed investigators to a confession in the study, written by John List himself. Upstairs, Alma lay dead beside her breakfast. The radio softly played organ music, the same hymn on repeat. It had been running for weeks. John List was gone. Investigators learned that John had drained his bank accounts, mailed family photographs to relatives, and disappeared. His car was found at JFK Airport, but no record of any flight. He had simply walked away and started over. He moved to Denver, Colorado, far from New Jersey, far from his past. Using the name Robert Peter Bob Clark, John List built an entirely new life. He joined a Lutheran church, worked as an accountant again, and remarried a widow named Dolores. To everyone who knew him, he was polite, quiet, even charming. He sang in the church choir. He volunteered. He lived like a man at peace, as if the massacre had never happened. Years passed, decades, no leads, no trace. The Knoll mansion eventually burned down in a mysterious fire in 1972, taking most physical evidence with it. The John List case faded into cold case files, until one night in 1989, when television brought him back from the shadows. In May 1989, the show America's Most Wanted aired the John List story. Producers enlisted forensic sculptor Frank Bender to create an age-progressed clay bust, predicting how List might look after nearly 2 decades. It was a masterpiece of forensic artistry. The sagging cheeks, square glasses, receding hairline. When the episode aired, millions watched, and among them was a woman in Denver who recognized her neighbor. The resemblance between Bob Clark and the bust was uncanny, even down to the glasses. She called the FBI. 11 days later, agents knocked on the door of John List's Richmond, Virginia home. When confronted, he calmly denied it at first, but after being presented with fingerprint analysis, he sighed and said softly, "You've got the right man." After 18 years, the ghost of Knoll had finally been unmasked. At trial, John List sat emotionless as prosecutors described the killings. He claimed he was mentally unstable, saying he believed God had forgiven him, but psychologists painted a darker picture. A narcissist obsessed with control and moral superiority. One who'd rather destroy his family than let them live without him. In 1990, John List was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms. He showed no visible remorse. In one interview years later, he said, "I feel what I did was wrong, but I still believe it was the best thing under the circumstances. He even admitted that if he'd faced the same situation again, he might have done it again. John List died in prison in 2008 at the age of 82. He never once apologized to his surviving relatives. Even today, the John List murders stand as one of the most haunting family annihilation cases in American history. A man who valued image over empathy, faith over family, control over compassion. John List fooled everyone: his neighbors, his friends, his own church, and perhaps himself. For 18 long years, he walked among ordinary people, hiding behind a polite smile and a Sunday suit, living as though nothing had ever happened. But the truth always finds its way back to the surface, and when it did, the mask of John List finally shattered, exposing the monster behind the man. What do you think drove him to do it? Was it pride, fear, a twisted sense of duty? And after 18 years of pretending to be someone else, do you think he ever truly felt remorse? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story gripped you as it did me, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because every crime hides a story, and every story leaves a trace. This is True Crime Vault 360, where the past speaks, the truth breathes, and the shadows never stay silent.